They cut me off at the will reading years later. They regretted every word when I returned the mahogany-paneled conference room at Patterson and Associates law firm in downtown Chicago felt suffocating that cold October morning in 2018. Michael Harrison sat rigidly in the burgundy leather chair, his calloused hands folded tightly in his lap as he watched his family members file in one by one. His older brother David strode in first, adjusting his expensive Armani suit with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Behind him came his sister Jennifer, her designer heels clicking against the polished marble floor, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light from the crystal chandelier above. The tension in the room was palpable as Michael's Aunt Margaret took her seat, her pearl necklace gleaming against her black dress. His Uncle Robert followed, nodding curtly at everyone except Michael, whom he seemed to look right through. The family patriarch, Michael's grandfather Edmund Harrison, had built a construction empire from nothing in the 1960s, and his sudden death at 87 had left everyone wondering how his vast fortune would be divided. Attorney James Patterson, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat as he opened the leather-bound will. The silence was deafening as he began to read the formal language that would determine each family member's future. Michael's heart pounded as he listened to the distribution of assets. The family's sprawling estate in Lake Forest went to David, the vacation home in Aspen to Jennifer, and various investment portfolios and business interests to other relatives. As the reading continued, Michael noticed the subtle glances exchanged between his family members, the way they avoided his eyes, the nervous shifting in their seats. When Patterson finally reached the end of the document, Michael's name had not been mentioned once. Not a single dollar, not a family heirloom, not even a personal memento from the grandfather who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. The lawyer's voice carried a hint of discomfort as he addressed the elephant in the room. Edmund Harrison had specifically included a clause explaining his decision to exclude Michael from his inheritance. The old man had written that Michael's choice to become a carpenter instead of joining the family business, his marriage to Sarah from a working-class family, and his decision to live in a modest apartment rather than the family compound had disappointed him deeply. In Edmund's view, Michael had rejected the Harrison name and everything it represented. The words hit Michael like physical blows, each sentence stripping away another layer of his dignity. His grandfather had viewed his honest work with his hands as somehow beneath the family standards, his choice to marry for love rather than social status as a betrayal of class expectations. The cruel irony was that Michael had learned his trade from Edmund himself, who had started as a carpenter before building his empire. But somewhere along the way, the old man had forgotten his humble beginnings and expected his family to transcend their roots entirely. David's reaction was perhaps the most devastating. Instead of showing any surprise or sympathy for his younger brother, he simply nodded as if he had expected this outcome all along. Jennifer examined her manicured nails with studied indifference, while the aunts and uncles maintained their stony silence. It became clear that they had all known about Michael's exclusion beforehand, that they had participated in or at least approved of this family tribunal that had judged him unworthy. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial loss. Michael realized that his family had never truly accepted him for who he was, that they had been waiting for him to conform to their expectations, and when he refused to abandon his authentic self, they had written him off completely. The grandfather who had taught him to swing a hammer, who had praised his craftsmanship as a teenager, had ultimately decided that Michael's integrity was worth less than his conformity to family expectations. As the meeting concluded and the family members began to file out, discussing lunch plans and upcoming social events, as if nothing momentous had just occurred, Michael remained seated in his chair. The weight of his exclusion settled over him like a heavy blanket, but beneath the hurt and shock, something else was stirring. A quiet determination began to take root. a resolve that would define the next chapter of his life. That evening, Michael sat in his small apartment kitchen, staring at the phone in his hand. Sarah had gone to bed early, exhausted from her double shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The silence gave him time to process what had happened, to feel the full impact of his family's rejection. But as the hours passed, his hurt began to transform into something more powerful, a fierce determination to prove them wrong. He thought about his grandfather's words, about how his choice to work with his hands was seen as a failure. But Michael knew the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and lasting, of solving problems with creativity and skill. He had always been proud of his work, and he refused to let his family's narrow-mindedness diminish that pride. Their rejection hurt, but it also freed him from the burden of their expectations. By dawn, Michael had made a decision that would change everything. He would not fight the will or beg for acceptance. Instead, he would channel his anger and hurt into building something extraordinary, something that would make them all regret their cruelty. He would show them that their money and social status were nothing compared to the power of determination and hard work. The family that had cut him off would one day wish they had never underestimated Michael Harrison. 7 years had passed since that devastating October morning, and Michael Harrison's life had transformed in ways his family could never have imagined. Standing in the lobby of his own construction company's headquarters in downtown Chicago, he gazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the bustling city below. Harrison Custom Homes had grown from a one-man operation working out of his apartment to a multi-million-dollar enterprise with over 200 employees and projects across the Midwest. The company's success story had become legendary in Chicago's business circles. Michael's innovative approach to sustainable construction, his commitment to fair wages and worker safety, and his reputation for delivering exceptional quality had attracted high-profile clients from tech executives to celebrities. The irony was not lost on him that his carpentry skills, once scorned by his family, had become the foundation of an empire that rivaled his grandfather's legacy. Sarah, now his wife of 5 years, had been his partner in every sense of the word. Her background in healthcare had inspired Michael to prioritize worker safety and wellness programs that became industry standards. Together, they had built not just a business, but a company culture that valued people over profits. The modest apartment they had shared was now a beautiful home in Lincoln Park, custom built by Michael's own hands, every detail reflecting their journey from struggle to success. The recognition had come gradually, then all at once. Industry awards, features in architectural magazines, and invitations to speak at conferences had established Michael as a thought leader in sustainable construction. But perhaps the most satisfying moment had been when the Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story about his company's innovative housing project for low-income families, describing him as a visionary who was changing the face of urban development. Michael's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. His family had reached out, requesting a meeting. The message was formal, sent through his lawyer, but the desperation was unmistakable. David's construction company had been struggling for years, plagued by cost overruns, safety violations, and a reputation for shoddy work. Jennifer's interior design business had failed after a series of client lawsuits. The family's real estate investments had soured during the economic downturn, and they were facing financial difficulties that once seemed impossible. The meeting was arranged for the following week at the same law firm where Michael had been humiliated 7 years earlier. But this time, the dynamics had completely shifted. When Michael walked into the conference room, he commanded immediate attention. His confidence was quiet but unmistakable, the bearing of someone who had proven himself in the crucible of adversity. He wore a simple but perfectly tailored suit, his hands still showing the calluses of someone who worked with them. But now they were the hands of a successful businessman who had never forgotten his roots. David looked older, worn down by years of business struggles and poor decisions. The arrogance that had once defined him had been replaced by a haunted look of someone who had watched his inheritance slip away through his own incompetence. Jennifer seemed smaller somehow, her designer clothes unable to hide the stress lines around her eyes. The aunts and uncles who had once looked through Michael now watched him with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed desperation. The purpose of the meeting became clear quickly. The family was in serious financial trouble, and they wanted Michael's help. David's company was facing bankruptcy, and the family's legal troubles stemming from construction defects and worker injury lawsuits had drained their resources. They needed Michael's expertise, his reputation, and yes, his money to save what remained of the Harrison legacy. The requests came in a flood of awkward explanations and thinly veiled appeals to family loyalty. They spoke of second chances, of how proud grandfather Edmund would have been of Michael's success, of how the family had always known he was special. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but Michael listened in silence, his expression neutral as his family members revealed just how completely their world had crumbled. But Michael's response was not what they expected. He didn't lash out with anger or cruel satisfaction. Instead, he spoke with the measured tone of someone who had long ago processed his pain and moved beyond it. He acknowledged their requests with professional courtesy, but made it clear that he owed them nothing. The family that had judged him unworthy of their name had proven themselves unworthy of his help. However, Michael's rejection was not driven by spite, but by principle. He had built his company on values of integrity, hard work, and loyalty to those who had supported him, the employees who had believed in him, the clients who had trusted him, the community that had embraced him. These were his true family now. He could not risk their futures to bail out relatives who had shown him nothing but contempt. The meeting ended with quiet finality. Michael's family members filed out of the conference room much as they had 7 years earlier, but now they were the ones leaving empty-handed. As Michael watched them go, he felt no triumph, only a deep sadness for what might have been. They had had everything handed to them and had squandered it through arrogance and poor judgment, while he had been forced to build his success from nothing. Walking back to his office, Michael reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. The family that had cut him off had inadvertently given him the greatest gift possible, the motivation to prove his worth on his own terms. Their rejection had hurt deeply, but it had also freed him to become the man he was meant to be, to build something meaningful and lasting that reflected his true values. That evening, Michael sat in his home office, looking at the framed photo of his grandfather that still held a place of honor on his desk. Despite everything, he had loved the old man and treasured the skills he had taught him. The irony was that by rejecting his family's expectations, Michael had actually honored his grandfather's true legacy better than any of them. He had taken the craftsmanship and work ethic Edmund had instilled in him and built something extraordinary. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was a call from a potential client, a non-profit organization that wanted to partner with Harrison Custom Homes on a housing project for veterans. As Michael discussed the details, he realized that this was his true legacy, not the money or recognition, but the knowledge that his work made a difference in people's lives. His family had tried to define his worth by their standards, but he had found his own measure of success. 7 years after being cut off from his family's will, Michael Harrison had discovered something more valuable than any inheritance: the unshakable confidence that comes from earning your place in the world. He had returned to face his family not as a supplicant seeking acceptance, but as a man who had transcended their petty judgments and built something they could never take away. Their regret was complete, but his vindication was absolute. Story of Michael Harrison served as a reminder that sometimes the greatest gift others can give us is their rejection, forcing us to discover strengths we never knew we possessed, and to build lives that reflect our authentic selves rather than their limited expectations. In cutting him off, his family had inadvertently set him free to become everything they had failed to see he could be.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.